She was trained to be invisible, to move through marble halls without a sound, to pour wine without a tremor, to disappear into walls papered with money and blood. But on the night Ava Bennett overheard a whispered death sentence at a Manhattan dinner table, invisibility became impossible. Because when the most feared crime boss in the city looked up and claimed her in front of his enemies, he didn't save her life. He signed it. If you want to know what happens when a quiet girl learns the loudest secret in New York, stay until the end. Hit like and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The snow came down over Manhattan the way it always did in late January. Slow, weightless, indifferent. It settled on the crowns of streetlights, on the shoulders of doormen who'd been standing outside too long, on the black sedans idling along Fifth Avenue like sleeping animals. 52 floors up, on the top of a building most people never looked twice at, the snow couldn't quite reach the windows. The wind was too strong up there. Up there, the weather did what the man inside told it to do. Or at least that was the joke the staff whispered when they thought no one was listening. Ava Bennett was listening. She was always listening. It was part of the job. The first thing Mrs. Calloway had told her 6 months ago on her very first morning at the Moretti penthouse was that a maid in this house had 2 ears and no mouth. "You hear things," the older woman had said, folding a stack of white napkins with the precision of a surgeon. "You never heard them. Do you understand, child?" Ava had understood. She had nodded with her chin tucked low, the way she'd learned to do in every kitchen and every hotel she'd worked in since she was 16. She was 23 now. She'd learned a lot of things by then. How to scrub a wine stain out of silk before it set. How to walk in soft-soled shoes so her footsteps never echoed. How to smile without showing her teeth when a man twice her age let his hand linger too long on her wrist. And how to send money home without leaving a trail. That last one mattered most. She was tying her apron in the service pantry when Mrs. Calloway came around the corner, her heels clicking on the tile like a metronome set too fast. The older woman had her clipboard pressed flat against her chest, and the tight line of her mouth meant trouble. "Bennett, come with me." "Yes, ma'am." "Mr. Moretti is having guests tonight." "Yes, ma'am." 8 of them. Dining room, 7 o'clock. Ava's hands paused on the apron strings. 8 guests in the private dining room meant a business dinner. Business dinners at the Moretti penthouse were not dinners. They were negotiations held under the cover of veal and Barolo, and the staff who served them were expected to be less than furniture. Furniture, at least, got polished. The staff just got forgotten. "Who's serving?" Ava asked, keeping her voice flat. "You." Ava's stomach dropped. "Ma'am, don't... I know what you're going to say. Marisol is sick. Elena's daughter has the flu. I need somebody steady, and I need somebody quiet, and you, Bennett, are the quietest thing in this building." Mrs. Calloway's eyes softened just for a second. "Just pour. Just clear. Don't look at anyone. Don't speak unless someone speaks to you, and if they do, you answer with 3 words or fewer. Do you hear me?" "Yes, ma'am." "And Bennett." "Ma'am?" Mrs. Calloway hesitated. In 6 months, Ava had never seen her hesitate about anything. "Whatever you hear in there tonight," the older woman said, "you forget it before it finishes hitting your ears. You understand?" Ava nodded, but she already knew she was lying. The private dining room at the Moretti penthouse was not the kind of place that made you feel welcome. It made you feel measured. The floors were black walnut, so dark they looked wet, and the long table down the center had been built from a single slab of marble the color of bone. The chairs were heavy and upholstered in oxblood leather, and the only art on the walls was a single oil painting, an old Italian coastline, cliffs diving into a sea the color of a bruise. Ava had looked at that painting 100 times in 6 months. She couldn't help it. There was something in the angle of the light on the water that reminded her of a postcard her grandmother had kept pinned above the sink in their little kitchen in Queens, back when her grandmother was still alive, and her mother was still sober, and her brother Ethan could still run up the stairs without stopping halfway to catch his breath. She didn't let herself think about that postcard tonight. Tonight she had 8 crystal water glasses to set, and 8 wine glasses, and 8 bread plates, and she had to do it all while her hands weren't shaking. They weren't shaking because of Mrs. Calloway. They weren't shaking because of the guests. They were shaking because that morning, before her shift, She had gone to see Ethan at the apartment in Astoria, and Ethan had been pale. Not his usual pale, a new kind of pale. The kind that had made his girlfriend, Sam, grab Ava's elbow in the hallway and whisper, "The doctor says we can't wait anymore. We can't." The surgery was $86,000. Ava had $4,200 saved. She had done the math so many times, in so many ways, that the numbers had stopped being numbers and had started being a sound, a long, flat tone behind her ribs that never quite went away. She set the last wine glass. She stepped back. She breathed. At 6:58, she heard the first elevator chime. Luca Moretti entered his own dining room the way other men entered a confessional, quietly, with a certain tiredness around the eyes. He was 29 years old, tall in a way that didn't rely on his posture, and he had the kind of face that photographs never quite managed to capture. The angles were too clean on film, the expression too still. In person, there was something under the stillness, something that made people lean back in their chairs without realizing they were doing it. He was dressed in charcoal that night. No tie, one button open at the throat. His dark hair was pushed back from his forehead, still a little damp from the shower, and he was turning a thin gold watch around his wrist in a slow, absent circle when he stepped into the room. Ava stood in the corner with her hands folded behind her back. She had served him dinner maybe 30 times in 6 months. He had spoken to her exactly twice, once to ask if the coffee was fresh, once to say thank you for a clean glass of water. Tonight his eyes moved across the room and snagged on her for half a second. Just half. Then they moved on. The guests came in after him. Ava recognized some of them from photographs Mrs. Calloway had quietly pointed out one afternoon in the laundry room, the way you might point out a rattlesnake in a yard so a new gardener wouldn't step on it. There was Salvatore Rocco, 61, heavy, with a laugh that sounded like coughing. There was Vincenzo Russo, thinner, younger, with silver hair and a mouth that never quite closed all the way. There was Dante Greco, who had once, according to a rumor Elena had sworn not to repeat, put a man through the ice on the Hudson with 3 men watching and none of them willing to testify. And there was one man Ava didn't recognize. He came in last. He was in his 40s, maybe. Compact. A suit that fit like it had been stitched on him that morning. His hair was oiled back and he had a gold ring on his little finger with a stone the color of dried blood. He walked slower than the others. When he stepped into the room, he did not look at Luca first. He looked at every corner of the room, one by one, the way a man looks when he's checking the exits. Then he looked at Ava. He looked at her for a full second. She kept her eyes on the floor. "Reza," Luca said, and his voice was easy, casual, a host's voice. "You made it." "I made it," the stranger said. His English had a faint accent Ava couldn't place. "Your driver took the scenic route." "My driver takes the route I tell him to take." "I noticed." The stranger smiled. Luca did not. They sat. Ava poured the first round of wine the way Mrs. Calloway had taught her, from the right, from a low angle, never letting the bottle click against the rim. She moved around the table counterclockwise. She kept her face neutral. She did not hear anything. She did not hear anything. She did not hear anything. She heard everything. She heard Salvatore Rocco complain about the feds on the waterfront. She heard Vincenzo Russo laugh too loud at a joke that wasn't funny. She heard Dante Greco ask Luca quietly if the thing in Red Hook had been taken care of, and she heard Luca say, quieter still, that it had been taken care of 2 days ago and that Dante should have known that already. She heard Reza say almost nothing. She heard him watching. When she bent to refill his glass, Barolo, second pour, he spoke to her for the first time. "What's your name, sweetheart?" She did not answer. She set the bottle down. She straightened. "Eyes up, honey. I'm talking to you." "Reza," Luca said from the head of the table, "I asked the girl a question." "She doesn't answer questions." "Everybody answers questions." Luca set down his knife. He set it down slowly, with a small and deliberate click against the marble. The room got quieter than it had any right to be. "She works for me," Luca said, "in my house. That makes her my staff. You want to know something about my staff? You ask me. Are we clear?" Reza smiled again. His smile didn't reach anything. "Clear as crystal, brother." "Good. I was just admiring the help. She's got a pretty mouth. Quiet girl, huh? Quiet girls make the best listeners. You must trust her a lot, letting her pour wine in a room like this. He turned his head just slightly toward Ava. You listen good, sweetheart. Ava's hands, behind her back now, tightened on each other hard enough that her nails bit into her palm. She said nothing. She doesn't answer questions, Luca said again. I already told you. Reza lifted his glass. He swirled it. Funny thing about quiet girls, though, sometimes they talk to the wrong people. Sometimes a man pays them a little something, and suddenly they remember a lot of things. You ever think about that, Luca? All these pretty quiet girls in your house, serving your wine, hearing your business. Must be something to trust so many people. Must be a lot to lose. The room had stopped breathing. Ava felt her own pulse behind her eyes. I don't lose, Luca said. No? No. Everybody loses, brother. Eventually. Not me. Reza took a slow sip of his wine. He looked at Ava over the rim of the glass. He did not stop looking at her, and that was when Ava understood, with a cold and unmistakable clarity that settled into her bones like frost, that the man across the table was threatening her life. Not with words anyone else could prove, with his eyes, with the slow curl at the corner of his mouth, with the way he had asked her name first and kept it in his hand like a piece of paper he might decide later to tear up. She had heard things in this house before. She had never heard anything like this. Luca stood up. He didn't slam anything. He didn't raise his voice. He just stood, one hand resting flat on the marble, and every head in the room turned toward him the way iron turns toward a magnet. Ava, he said. Her name, in his mouth, sounded like it had always been there. She looked up. Come here. She didn't move. She couldn't. Her feet were stone. Her heart was a bird in a jar. Ava! She moved. She crossed the length of the dining room on legs that didn't feel like hers. She stopped at his elbow. He didn't look at her. He was looking at Reza. This one, Luca said, gesturing to her without ever breaking eye contact across the table, is mine. You understand me, Reza? Not the help, not the staff. Mine. You ever speak to her again without my permission? You ever so much as look at her across a street, and I'll consider it a declaration. Are we clear? The silence that followed was so absolute that Ava could hear her own blood. Reza set his wine glass down. Clear, brother, he said, and this time his smile had nothing in it at all. Clear as crystal. Good. Luca turned his head. For the first time that night he looked at her. Really looked at her. And his eyes, up close, were not the cold things she had always imagined. They were tired. They were careful. There was something in them she didn't have a name for yet, something that would take her months to understand. But at that moment, all she knew was that he was not looking at her like a man looking at a maid. He was looking at her like a man who had just pulled something out of a fire without thinking, and was only now, holding it in his hands, beginning to understand he had burned himself. Go back to the kitchen, he said quietly. She went. Kop. She made it to the pantry before her knees gave out. She sat on a step stool in the narrow little room between the dining hall and the main kitchen, and she put her hands on her thighs, and she breathed in through her nose until she didn't feel like she was going to throw up. Mrs. Calloway came in at some point. Mrs. Calloway did not ask what had happened. Mrs. Calloway put a glass of water on the counter next to her and touched her once, very lightly, on the shoulder and left. Ava drank the water. She did not cry. Crying was for later. Crying was a luxury. Crying was for women who did not have a brother in an apartment in Astoria who couldn't climb the stairs anymore. Ava Bennett did not have time for luxuries. She finished the glass. She washed it. She went back out on the floor. Dinner ended at 10:47. The guests left one by one with handshakes that lasted a beat too long and eye contact that lasted a beat longer. Reza was the last to go. He didn't look at Ava on the way out. That, somehow, was worse. When a man like that stopped looking at you, it didn't mean he'd forgotten you. It meant he'd filed you away. Ava cleared the table alone. She was stacking the bread plates when she realized she wasn't alone. Luca was standing in the doorway. He had taken his jacket off. His sleeves were rolled to the forearm. In the low amber light of the dining room chandelier, he looked younger than 29. He looked, for just a second, like somebody who had not slept in a long time. Leave the plates, he said. Sir, I... Leave them. Sit down. She stood very still. Sir? Sit, please. She sat. She sat at the far end of the marble table, in a chair that cost more than her mother's rent. She kept her hands folded in her lap. He walked the length of the table and did not sit. He leaned against the back of the chair across from her, arms crossed, watching her the way a person watches a cup they've just filled too full. What's your last name? He asked. Bennett, sir. How long have you been in this house, Bennett? 6 months, sir. And before that? The Plaza, sir, housekeeping. Before that, the Tribeca Grand. Before that... She stopped. Does it matter, sir? No. A pause. It doesn't. I'm sorry. That was the wrong question. He rubbed a hand across his jaw. She heard the faint scrape of stubble against his palm. Do you know who that man was tonight? He said. No, sir. Liar. Her eyes flicked up. He wasn't angry. There was, if anything, the faintest curl at the corner of his mouth. Something that was not a smile, but was in the family of smiles. You know exactly who he was, he said more softly. You may not have his name, but you know what he was. I watched your face when he looked at you. You knew. I could see it. Ava swallowed. Yes, sir. There it is. Sir, I'm sorry. I didn't mean... Don't apologize for being smart, Bennett. Don't ever apologize for that. He pushed off the chair and walked 2 slow steps along the length of the table. His name is Reza Farah. He's a problem of mine. He has been a problem of mine for about 18 months, and tonight he did something at my table that I cannot let stand, which means I now have to make a decision about him that I was hoping to avoid for another 6 weeks. Do you understand what I'm telling you? I think so, sir. No, you don't. He stopped. What I'm telling you, he said, is that you walked into a room tonight as one thing, and you walked out as another. You understand? Before tonight, you were my maid. After tonight, you are a person Reza Farah has taken an interest in. That is not a small change, Bennett. That is the entire shape of your life changing while you were holding a bottle of wine. She was quiet for a long second. Sir, she said, why did you claim me? It surprised her hearing the words out loud. It seemed to surprise him too. He looked at her for a long time, long enough that she started to think he wasn't going to answer, long enough that she started to wish she hadn't asked. Because if I hadn't, he said finally, by tomorrow morning, you wouldn't have been in this building. Sir, you would have been in a trunk, Bennett, somewhere off the Belt Parkway. They would have gotten to you before you finished your shift, and they would have made it look like a mugging. And the only people who would have asked questions would have been your family, and nobody would have listened to them. That's what you walked into when you walked into that room tonight. You did nothing wrong. You poured wine. But you heard a word you weren't supposed to hear, and he saw you hear it, and that was the end of you. Unless, she repeated, unless I made it clear in front of 4 witnesses that touching you was touching me, which I did. She stared at him. I don't know how to thank you, sir. Don't thank me. Sir, don't. His voice was suddenly harder. Don't thank me, Bennett, because I didn't do it for you. I did it because I will not have a man like Reza Farah dictate what happens under my roof. If you had been a different maid, I would have done the same thing. Do you understand? She nodded slowly. But she didn't believe him. In a small, quiet part of her, the part that had been trained for 6 months to hear things she wasn't supposed to hear, noticed that he didn't quite believe himself either. He let her go a few minutes after that. She walked back to the staff corridor on legs that still weren't entirely hers. When she pushed open the service door, Mrs. Calloway was standing in the hall with her coat already on and her purse slung over her shoulder, and the older woman's face had lost every last trace of its usual tight composure. What did he say to you? Mrs. Calloway demanded. He said... Ava shook her head. He said I should be careful. That's all? That's all. Mrs. Calloway searched her face for a long moment. Then, without a word, she unlooped a small silver pendant from around her own neck and pressed it into Ava's palm. Put that on, she said. Under your uniform. Don't take it off. Ma'am? It's a panic button, Bennett. You press it 3 times fast and it sends a location to a number I keep. That's all you need to know. Now go home. Use the service elevator. Take a different train than usual. Do you have somebody waiting for you? My brother. Go to him. Don't stop anywhere. Don't talk to anyone. Ma'am, Bennett. Mrs. Calloway's mouth trembled, just for a second. Listen to me. I have worked in this house for 11 years. I have served men at that table who would kill a girl like you for sport. Tonight, for the first time in 11 years, Mr. Moretti stood up for somebody at that table. Do you know what that means? No, ma'am. It means, Mrs. Calloway said quietly, that he sees you, which is the most dangerous thing that has ever happened to you. Do you understand? Ava closed her fingers around the pendant. Yes, ma'am, she said. Go. She rode the service elevator down 52 floors in silence. The cables hummed. The mirror in the back wall showed her a woman she almost didn't recognize. Cheeks flushed, pupils too wide, the collar of her black uniform slightly askew. She fixed the collar with numb fingers. She did not look at her own eyes. The lobby at that hour was a cathedral of marble and empty space. The night doorman, Marco, nodded at her from behind his desk the way he always did. He did not ask her how her shift had gone. Marco had worked for the Morettis for 15 years. Marco did not ask anybody how their shift had gone. The cold hit her the second she stepped out onto Fifth Avenue. The snow had thickened. The street was a hush of white over black, and the headlights of a passing cab dragged their yellow over the curb and were gone. Ava pulled her scarf up over her mouth and walked east toward the subway, with her hands in her pockets and her breath fogging the wool. 2 blocks from the building, she had the feeling. Every woman who has ever walked a city at night knows the feeling. It is not a sound. It is a shape in the air behind you. It is a tightening at the base of your skull. She did not turn around. She did not change her pace. She crossed at the light. She walked another block. She stopped at a newspaper stand that she knew, from 6 months of the same walk, had a mirrored strip along the side where the owner kept an eye on the register. In the mirror, half a block back, a man in a dark coat stopped walking at exactly the same moment she did. He was not looking at her. He was looking at a phone. The phone wasn't on. Ava's hand closed around the silver pendant at the base of her throat. Her thumb found the little raised stud on the back of it. She did not press it. Not yet. She made herself breathe. She made herself think. The subway was 4 blocks away. She had $4,200 in a savings account. She had a brother who could not climb the stairs anymore. She had, somewhere inside her coat pocket, a folded piece of paper with the surgeon's quote written in her own handwriting. $86,000, 6-week window. She had now a man 52 floors above her who had stood up in a room full of killers and said the word mine about her. And she had now a man half a block behind her who had been sent to make sure that word didn't mean anything by morning. She started walking again. She did not take the subway. She walked 3 blocks in the wrong direction, turned into a hotel lobby she had cleaned rooms in 2 jobs ago, nodded at the night clerk like she belonged there, and walked straight through to the service exit on the other side. She came out on a different avenue. She caught a cab. She gave the driver her brother's address in Astoria, and then 2 blocks later changed it to an address 6 blocks from her brother's apartment. She walked the last 6 blocks with her scarf pulled high and her shoulders curled in. When she finally pushed open the door of Ethan's building, her hands were shaking so hard she could not get her key into the lock on the mailboxes. Sam heard her come up the stairs. Sam opened the apartment door before Ava could knock. Sam took one look at her face and said, very quietly, "Oh my God, what happened?" Ava didn't answer. She walked past Sam and into the small living room where Ethan was asleep on the couch, with a blanket pulled up to his chin and his lips still that wrong pale color. And she knelt down beside him, and she pressed her forehead against the edge of the couch cushion, and she let her shoulders shake, exactly once, without making any sound at all. Then she stopped. She wiped her face with the back of her sleeve. She stood up. "Sam," she said, "I need you to listen very carefully." "Ava, you're scaring me." "I know. I'm sorry. I need you to listen anyway." She took a breath. "I can't tell you what happened tonight. I need you to trust me that I can't. What I need you to do is this. Tomorrow morning, you take Ethan to the hospital. Not our hospital. A different one. I'll give you the name. You check him in under your last name, not ours. You say he's your brother. You say your insurance is coming. You do not leave that hospital until I come and get you. Do you understand me?" "Ava, do you understand me, Sam?" Sam, who who was 21 and tired and in love with a boy whose heart was failing, nodded. She didn't understand, but she nodded. "Good," Ava said. "Good." She sat down on the edge of the couch beside her sleeping brother. She looked at his face for a long time. She thought about the man 52 floors up. She thought about the word mine and the way it had sounded when he said it. She thought about Reza Farah and his ring the color of dried blood. And she thought about the $86,000 that was the difference between her brother waking up in 6 weeks and her brother not waking up at all. She thought about the pendant at her throat, 3 times fast. She did not press it. Not yet. Somewhere outside, the snow kept falling on Manhattan, indifferent as it had ever been. Somewhere 52 floors up, a young man in a charcoal suit with his sleeves rolled to the forearm was still standing in a dining room with a glass of red wine in his hand, looking at a painting of an Italian coastline and thinking about a maid named Ava Bennett, whose name he had said out loud, in front of his enemies, for reasons he had not yet admitted to himself. Down here, the maid unfastened the silver pendant from around her neck, closed it inside her palm, and sat very still in the dark of her brother's living room, waiting for morning. She didn't know it yet, but the life she had been living, the quiet one, the invisible one, the one stitched together out of double shifts and saved tips and the small, desperate arithmetic of a brother's failing heart, had ended 2 hours ago, at a marble table, the moment a man looked up from his wine and said her name like it had always belonged in his mouth. The one that was coming for her now would have no quiet in it at all. Morning came to Astoria the way it always did. Gray, metallic, smelling faintly of diesel from the bus depot 2 blocks over. Ava hadn't slept. She had sat on the edge of the couch with her coat still on until the radiator started clanking at 5:30, and then she had stood up very quietly and walked the 3 steps to the kitchenette and put water on for coffee that she wasn't going to drink. Her hands had stopped shaking sometime around 4. Her mind had not. Ethan was awake before 6. She heard him before she saw him. The slow, careful shuffle of his slippers on the linoleum. The small, dry cough he had started doing to disguise the sound of his breathing. He came around the corner in the old Mets t-shirt he'd been wearing since he was 15, and when he saw her standing at the counter with her coat still buttoned to her throat, he stopped. "You didn't come home last night," he said. His voice was rough. "I came home." "You were asleep. You slept on the couch?" "I sat on the couch." Ethan looked at her. He was 19 years old, 5'10", and he weighed 131 pounds. He had their mother's cheekbones and their father's eyes, and a heart that had been running on borrowed time since he was 11. He had learned somewhere along the way to read his sister's face the way other people read weather reports. "Ava." "Sit down, Eth." "Ava, what's going on?" "Sit down, please." He sat. She poured him a glass of water instead of coffee. He wasn't supposed to have caffeine anymore, one of the small dignities his cardiologist had taken away from him last spring, and she set the glass in front of him and she sat down across the little kitchen table and she told him a version of the truth. Not all of it. She would not have told him all of it, even if she could have found the words. She told him she had seen something at work. She told him her boss had been kind. She told him she thought, maybe, that Sam needed to take him to a different hospital today, just to be careful, just while she figured a few things out. He listened. He did not interrupt. When she was done, he reached across the table and put his hand on top of hers, and his hand was cold, the way his hands were always cold now, and he said, "You're not telling me something. Eth, you're not telling me something, and I'm not going to make you. But if you get yourself hurt over me, Ava, I swear to God, don't. I swear to God, Ava." "Ethan, stop." Her voice cracked just once on his name. She hated that. She pulled her hand back and wiped under her eye with her thumb, fast, before he could see. "I need you to do what I'm asking. That's all. Can you do that for me?" He watched her for a long second. "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, I can do that." Sam came out of the bedroom in sweatpants and one of Ethan's flannel shirts, her hair twisted up in a scrunchie. She looked from Ava to Ethan and back again, and whatever she saw on Ava's face was enough. She didn't ask anything. She started packing a bag. Ava left the apartment at 7:15 with the address of the new hospital written on the back of a receipt and pressed into Sam's hand, and she did not take the train. She walked 11 blocks in the other direction, caught a cab off Steinway, paid the driver in cash, and took the long route back to Manhattan, over the Queensboro Bridge because she wanted, just for a few minutes, to see the East River and breathe. The water was gray. The sky was grayer. The city on the other side looked like a set of teeth. Her shift started at 10. She didn't know if she was going to make it through the door. She did. The lobby of the Moretti building was warm and too bright after the cold, and the morning doorman, a different man than Marco, younger, a Jim Arms kid named Devin, nodded at her the way he always did. She swiped her staff card at the service elevator. The elevator took her up the 52 floors in silence. When the doors opened, Mrs. Calloway was standing in the corridor waiting for her. "You're late." "Ma'am, I'm 8 minutes early." "You're late, Bennett. Come with me." She followed. Mrs. Calloway walked fast on days she was frightened, and today she was walking very fast. She led Ava not to the service pantry but down the East Hall, past the dining room, past the main kitchen, past the little reading room with the leather chairs nobody ever sat in, all the way to a door Ava had never been through before. It was a narrow door, the same shade of pale cream as the wall, almost invisible unless you knew to look for it. Mrs. Calloway knocked twice. A voice on the other side said, "Come." Mrs. Calloway opened the door. She stepped back. She gestured Ava through without meeting her eyes. "Go on, Bennett," she said quietly. "He asked for you." Ava went in. The room on the other side of the door was not what she expected. She had expected an office. Another room of marble and black walnut, maybe, or something cold and lawyerly with a desk the size of a car. What she found instead was a library. A small one. 3 walls of books from floor to ceiling, the shelves built from something warm and pale that might have been ash, a single green-shaded banker's lamp on a low table between 2 old leather chairs, a fireplace that was lit, a window that looked south down the length of the island, and on a clear morning would have shown her half of lower Manhattan. Luca Moretti was standing at the window with his back to her. He was in a white dress shirt with the sleeves already rolled to the forearm, even at 10 in the morning, and he had a cup of coffee in his hand. No jacket, no tie. His hair was not damp today. He looked like a man who had been awake for a long time. "Close the door, Bennett." She closed the door. "Sit down." She sat in one of the leather chairs. The leather was soft and warm and smelled faintly of tobacco, though nothing in the room had been smoked in years. She sat with her knees together and her hands folded in her lap and her back not quite touching the chair the way she had learned to sit in rooms like this. He turned around. "I didn't sleep last night," he said. "Sir?" "Neither did you. I can see it." "Sir, I'm fine to work." "I'm not asking if you're fine to work. Stop." He set the coffee down on the low table between them. He sat down across from her. Up close, in the daylight, she could see the things the chandelier had hidden last night. A faint shadow under his eyes, a small nick on his jaw where he had cut himself shaving, the slight tremor in his left hand when he reached for the cup and decided, halfway there, not to pick it up again. She noticed it the way Mrs. Calloway had trained her to notice things. She filed it away the same way. "I owe you the truth about a few things," Luca said. "I don't owe it to you because I'm a good man. I'm going to stop you before you try to reassure me on that point. I owe it to you because I made a decision last night that involved your life, and I made it without asking you, and the least I can do now is explain what the decision was." Ava said nothing. "There was a man outside this building last night," he said, "after you left. He followed you 3 blocks. You lost him at the hotel on Lexington, the one with the 2 exits. That was smart, by the way." Her heart skidded. "How do you know that?" "Because I had somebody on you, too." The room tilted, just slightly. "Sir." "Don't sir me right now, Bennett. Listen, I had somebody on you because I knew Reza was going to have somebody on you, and I needed to know which of us got to you first. Mine got to you first. That's why you're sitting in this chair this morning, and not in a morgue in Brooklyn. Do you understand me?" She understood. She understood in the way you understand a loud noise. Not in words, but in the way your body flinches before your brain catches up. "Yes, sir," she said. "Reza Farah made a calculation last night," Luca said. "He looked at you. He watched me look at you, and he made a bet. His bet was that I claimed you because you mattered to me. His bet was that I said the word I said at that table because I was afraid. And if I was afraid, that means he has leverage he didn't have yesterday, and leverage is the only thing men like Reza Farah understand. Do you follow?" "Yes, sir." "So now he has 2 choices. He can either try to take you, which is what he attempted last night, and which he failed at, which means he now knows I was ready for him. Or he can try to buy you, which is what he'll do next. Sir, I wouldn't. Don't. His voice was sharp, not unkind. Don't tell me what you wouldn't do, Bennett. You don't know what you'd do yet. You don't know the number. You don't know what they'll threaten. Don't make a promise in this chair that you can't keep in the dark. Are we clear? She closed her mouth. Yes, sir. Good. He leaned back in the chair. He studied her for a long moment. In the light from the window, his eyes were not black the way she had always thought. They were a very dark brown, warm at the edges, and there was something in the shape of them, a tiredness, a carefulness, that made him look, just for a second, like a boy who had been handed a knife too young. Tell me about your brother, he said. She went very still. Sir, your brother, Ethan, 19, Queens, congenital heart defect, worsening. I'm going to assume you've been ignoring the surgery because you don't have the money. How close are you? She could not speak for a second. How do you know about Ethan? Because I run a house, Bennett. I know who my people are. I knew about your brother the week you were hired. You think I let people pour my wine without knowing who they send their paychecks home to? Sir, how close are you to the money? 4,200. Of? 86,000. Yes, sir. He was quiet. And the window? 6 weeks. Maybe 4 now. His cardiologist said, she said he's decompensating. That's the word she used. He looked worse this morning than he did yesterday. The words came out before she could stop them. She had not meant to say any of that. She had meant to sit in this chair and nod and say yes, sir, and no, sir, and wait for him to tell her whatever he was going to tell her, and then go back to pouring wine. Instead, her voice had cracked on the word yesterday, and now his eyes were on her, and she could feel her lower lip starting to do the thing it did when she was too tired to hold her face together. And she looked down at her hands and willed herself furiously not to cry in this library, not in front of this man, not today. Bennett? I'm sorry, sir. Stop apologizing. Yes, sir. Look at me. She looked up. I'm going to pay for your brother's surgery. The sentence did not immediately make sense. The words arrived in the wrong order. She heard them, and then she heard them again, and then she heard them a third time before her brain caught up. Sir, I'm going to pay for it. All of it. The surgery, the post-op, the rehab, the cardiologist of your choice, whatever he needs. He's not going to die because his sister didn't have $86,000. That's the answer to that question. We don't need to keep talking about it. Sir, I can't. You can, and you will, because if you don't, he dies, and I will not have that on your conscience or on mine. So, moving on, sir. Moving on, Bennett. Sir, I can't pay you back. I know. I can't, Bennett. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his hands loose between them. His voice was very low. I am not asking you to pay me back. I am not lending this to you. I am not putting it on a ledger. I am doing this because I can, and because I want to, and because I will not let a boy die in Queens in the year of our so-called progress because his sister works for a man who has more money than sense. Are we clear? She could not breathe. Yes, sir. Good. Sir, why? The question surprised them both. She hadn't meant to ask it. She'd meant to say thank you, and she would have, eventually, if she could have found her voice. Instead, what came out was why, in a very small voice, and it hung between them in the library air like a moth. Luca looked at her for a long time. I don't know yet, Bennett. Sir, I don't know yet. That's the honest answer. I'll know in a few weeks, probably. Right now, I just know that last night at that table, I watched a man I despised decide to kill a woman who had done nothing wrong except pour his wine. And I stood up before I thought about it, and I said a word I hadn't planned to say, and now here we are. The rest of it, I'm still figuring out. You're going to have to let me figure it out. In the meantime, your brother lives. Does that work for you? She let out a breath she had been holding since 10 o'clock the previous night. Yes, sir? Good. He stood up. He walked to a small desk in the corner that she hadn't noticed, and he opened a drawer and he took out a phone, a small cheap one, the kind you buy with cash at a bodega, and he came back across the room and he set it on the arm of her chair. This is yours now. You carry it with you. You don't tell anyone about it. You don't use it to call your mother or your brother or Sam or anyone you know. There's one number saved in it. It's mine. If something happens, if you see the same car on your block twice, if a man bumps into you on the subway and your wallet is still in your pocket, if a stranger offers you money, any money, for any reason, you call that number. You don't text. You don't leave a voicemail. You call, and you let it ring once, and you hang up, and somebody will be at your location in 8 minutes. Do you understand? Yes, sir. Good. Sir. What? What happens now? He looked down at her. He almost smiled. It was a tired thing, the shape of a smile without any of the warmth, but it was the first one she had seen on him. Now you go back to work, Bennett. You pour wine. You clear plates. You do your job exactly the way you did it yesterday. And you let me worry about Reza Farah. She stood up. The phone was light in her hand. It weighed nothing and everything at the same time. Sir. Yes. Thank you. He looked at her for one more moment. Something moved behind his eyes. Something she would not be able to name for weeks, maybe months, and that he would not be able to name for longer than that. Then he nodded, once, and turned back to the window. Go to work, Bennett. She went. The days that followed did not feel like days. They felt like held breaths. Ethan's surgery was scheduled for the following Tuesday at a hospital Ava had never heard of, in a private wing she did not know existed, with a surgeon whose name she was told not to look up. Sam was moved, quietly and without explanation, into a hotel 2 blocks from the hospital for the duration. Ava was told to go to work as if nothing had changed. She went to work, she poured wine, she cleared plates. She did her job exactly the way she had done it yesterday, and she did not, except in the smallest moments, let herself think about the fact that a man she had served for 6 months in silence had just, without fanfare, without condition, saved her brother's life. She thought about it anyway. She thought about it at night, lying awake in the staff quarters, staring at the ceiling tiles. She thought about it on the subway on her off days, pressed between strangers with her hand curled around the cheap phone in her coat pocket. She thought about it every time she walked past the library door on the East Hall, which she did 4 times a shift, and which was always closed now, and behind which she could sometimes hear him talking, low and steady, in Italian. On a phone call, she was not allowed to overhear. He spoke to her more now. Not much more. A few sentences at a time. A question about the coffee. A comment about the weather. Once, on a Thursday, when she came into the main kitchen and found him standing at the counter eating cold leftover pasta out of a takeout container at 11 at night, he looked up and said, "You're still here." And she said, "I could ask you the same thing, sir." And he laughed. A real laugh. A short, surprised, uneven thing. And she stopped in the doorway and felt something in her chest do a small, dangerous thing that she told herself immediately was just tiredness. It wasn't tiredness. She knew it wasn't tiredness. She told herself it was anyway, because the alternative was a country she could not afford to live in. On the Tuesday morning of Ethan's surgery, she was on the 6th train to the hospital when the man sat down next to her. The car was mostly empty. It was 9:40 in the morning, well past rush hour, and she had taken a seat by the door with her bag in her lap and her eyes on the reflection in the dark window across from her. She had learned over the last week to watch reflections the way other people watch the road. The man who sat down next to her was not Reza Farah. He was younger, heavier. A blue wool coat, a neatly trimmed beard, the kind of watch you noticed because the person wearing it wanted you to. He sat down and he did not look at her, and he said very quietly, without moving his mouth very much, "Don't get off at your stop, Miss Bennett." Her hand closed around the phone in her pocket. "Don't do that either," he said. "Don't press anything. Just listen. I'm not going to touch you. I'm not going to follow you. I'm going to get off at 59th Street, and you're never going to see me again. I have 40 seconds. Will you listen?" She did not answer. "Your brother has his surgery in an hour," the man said. "Sam is already at the hospital. She's in the waiting room on the 4th floor, West Wing. She's drinking a coffee from the vending machine. She doesn't like the coffee from the vending machine, but she's drinking it anyway because she doesn't know what else to do with her hands." Ava's blood went cold. "We know where your brother is, Miss Bennett. We know where your mother is. We know the name of Sam's aunt in Yonkers, and we know the name of the cat she left there when she moved in with your brother last year. None of this is a threat. This is just so you understand who you're talking to. Will you listen?" She made herself breathe. Yes. Good. Your employer is in a lot of trouble right now. He's in more trouble than he thinks. Some people he's been dealing with for a long time have decided that the way he handled himself at a certain dinner last week was embarrassing. Embarrassing is a dangerous thing to be in his line of work. Do you understand? Yes. Good. Those people have asked me to give you a very simple offer. You don't have to decide anything today. You don't have to say yes or no in the next 40 seconds. All I'm doing right now is telling you the number. The number is $2 million. It's not a negotiation. It's not the opening. It's the whole number. You don't ask for more. You don't ask for less. You tell us what he says in his library when the door is closed. You tell us who comes to dinner. You tell us the names he says on the phone when he thinks nobody can hear him. That's all. You don't have to do anything violent. You don't have to hurt anybody. You just have to listen, the way you're already being paid to listen, and then tell us what you heard. Are we clear so far? Yes. Your brother's surgery is paid for. We know that too. We know who paid for it. We know how much. We know he's alive today because a man who is about to be in a lot of trouble decided to write a very large check. That's fine. That's his choice. But I want you to think about something, Miss Bennett, and I want you to think about it carefully. That man is not going to be alive in 6 months. He is not going to be alive in 3. The people I work for have decided. And when he goes, everything he paid for goes with him. Your brother's follow-up care, the cardiologist, the rehab, the quiet little account somebody set up for your mother last Thursday that you don't know about yet. All of it disappears. Unless I take the $2 million. Unless you take the $2 million, which covers your brother for life, which covers your mother, which covers a house if you want one in a state nobody knows your name in. You walk away with your family intact. You walk away clean. The alternative is you ride this out with your very charming and very handsome employer, and in 6 weeks or 6 months you bury him, and then you bury your brother, and then we see what you have left. Her mouth was dry. The train rattled through the dark. 59th Street is next, the man said. I'm going to stand up. I'm going to get off. I'm not going to look at you. You're going to have a week to think about it. At the end of the week, somebody will find you in a place of your choosing, and you'll give them a one-word answer, and that's the end of it either way. Do you understand? Yes. Good. The train slowed. The doors opened. The man stood up. He buttoned his wool coat. He did not look at her. He stepped off onto the platform, turned left, and was gone into the thin morning crowd before the doors closed. The train pulled out of the station. Ava did not get off at her stop. She rode 3 stops past the hospital. She got off at a station she didn't know. She walked up into daylight she couldn't feel. She stood on a street corner with her bag pressed against her chest, and for the first time in a week, she did the thing she had been refusing to do in front of her brother, in front of Mrs. Calloway, in front of Luca Moretti in his library. She cried. She cried for about a minute and a half. She cried standing up, with her back against the cold wall of a bodega, and she did not make any sound because she had trained herself out of making sounds a long time ago. Then she wiped her face with the back of her glove, and she took the cheap phone out of her pocket and she dialed the 1 number in it. She let it ring once. She hung up. She walked 3 more blocks, east toward the river, away from the hospital and away from the train, and she stood at a corner where a black car was going to pull up in 8 minutes, and she thought about the number. 2 million. She thought about Ethan, who was at that exact moment being wheeled into an operating room on the 4th floor of a hospital she had never heard of, to have his chest opened by a surgeon whose name she had been told not to look up. She thought about her mother in the little apartment in Jackson Heights, who did not yet know that someone, somewhere, had put money into an account in her name. She thought about Sam, drinking coffee she didn't like, alone in a waiting room, and she thought for one long, terrible second about taking the 2 million. It was not a thought she was proud of. It was not a thought she would tell anyone about, not then, not later, not ever. But it was a thought she had, standing on that cold corner on 2nd Avenue with tears drying on her face, because she was a tired woman with a sick brother and a mother on the edge. And $2 million was not a number that belonged to people like her. Then she thought about the library. She thought about a man in a white shirt with his sleeves rolled to the forearm, sitting across from her in a leather chair, saying he's not going to die because his sister didn't have $86,000. She thought about the way he had said it, not like a gift, not like a trade, but like a line he had drawn in his own head, quietly, without meaning to, and then stepped across. Somewhere behind her, a car horn blew. She turned. The black car was at the curb. The back door was already open. A man she had never seen before, older, gray at the temples, a small scar through one eyebrow, was standing beside it, not looking at her, scanning the street in both directions. "Miss Bennett." "Yes." "Get in the car, please. We're going to see Mr. Moretti." She got in the car. The door closed behind her, the locks engaged. The car pulled into traffic. And somewhere, 52 floors up, in a small library with 3 walls of books and a fireplace that was lit, a man was already waiting for her, and he did not yet know what she was about to tell him. And when she told him everything, the shape of his week, the shape of his month, the shape of the rest of his life, was going to change. She pressed her forehead against the cool glass of the window and watched Manhattan go past. She was not crying anymore. She was thinking. The car moved north through midtown traffic without hurry. The driver never once looked in the rearview mirror at her, and the man with the scar through his eyebrow sat in the front passenger seat with a hand loose on his knee and his eyes on the side mirrors. Nobody spoke. Ava had expected questions. She had expected somebody to ask her what had happened on the train, whether she'd been touched, whether she'd been followed, whether she'd been offered something. Nobody asked her anything. That was how she knew, with a cold certainty that settled into her chest like a stone, that Luca already knew. He'd known the second she'd let that phone ring once and hung up. He'd probably known before. She pressed her hand flat against the seat beside her to keep her fingers from shaking. It didn't work. She pressed harder. Her thumb found the edge of the leather piping along the seam, and she ran her thumbnail along it, back and forth, the way her grandmother used to rub the edge of a rosary when the phone rang late at night. They did not go back to the Moretti building. The car turned east at 79th, then north on Park, then east again, and then it slid down a ramp into an underground garage beneath a building Ava had never noticed before, a squat brown thing with no sign out front and no numbers above the door. The garage was empty except for 2 other black cars and a concrete pillar with a small brass plate on it that had no writing on it at all. "This way, Miss Bennett." The man with the scar held the door. She got out. Her legs were steadier than she had any right to expect. He walked her through a service door, down a hallway painted the kind of beige that nobody chose on purpose, and into a small elevator with no buttons. The elevator moved. She could not tell if it was going up or down. When the doors opened, she was in a room. It was a room she had never seen, in a building she did not know existed, but she recognized it instantly. It was the twin of the library on the 52nd floor. Same shelves, same warm pale wood, same green-shaded banker's lamp, same 2 leather chairs. The fireplace was not lit this time. The window looked east over a rooftop she did not recognize at a sliver of the river beyond. Luca was already there. He was standing with one hand braced flat against the mantel of the cold fireplace, and his other hand was a fist at his side, and when the elevator chimed and she stepped through the door, he did not turn around. "Sit down, Bennett." She sat. "Tell me what he said to you." She told him. Not in order. The order had come apart somewhere on 2nd Avenue, but she told him everything. The blue wool coat, the beard, the watch, the 40 seconds, Sam in the 4th floor waiting room drinking bad coffee, the account in her mother's name, the number, which she said out loud once, flatly, the way she would have said a temperature, 2 million, and then did not say again. She told him about the follow-up care disappearing. She told him about the 6 weeks, the 3 months, when he goes, everything goes with him. She did not tell him about the second on 2nd Avenue when she had thought about it. That was for her. When she was done, Luca still hadn't turned around. His hand was still on the mantel. His shoulders had gone very still. Not the stillness of a man who was calm, but the stillness of a man who was deciding which of the 3 things he wanted to do next was the one he could afford. "They said a week," he said finally. "Yes? At the end of the week, somebody's going to find you and ask you for a 1-word answer. Yes, and the word is yes or no." "Yes." He let go of the mantel. He turned around. His face was not angry. Ava had been braced for anger, and she did not find it, and the absence of it was somehow worse. His face had the look of a man doing long division in his head, rapid, precise, internal. His eyes moved across hers without landing on them. "Bennett." "Sir, I need to ask you a question. I need you to answer it honestly. If you lie to me right now, I will not be angry and I will not punish you, but we will never have another conversation, and the car downstairs will take you home, and a very large amount of money will be deposited into several accounts, and you will never see this building or me again. Are we clear?" "Yes, sir." "Did you consider it?" Her mouth was dry. "Yes, sir." "For how long?" "A few seconds, maybe 10, on the corner of 2nd and 64th. He watched her. For one long, terrible moment, she thought he was going to send her home. Then something in his face changed. The corner of his mouth did something that was almost a smile but had no warmth in it yet, only recognition. He nodded, once. "Good." "Sir." "Good, Bennett. I'd have thrown you out of this room if you'd said no. Nobody considers $2 million for 0 seconds unless they're lying to themselves or to me, and I don't have time for either one today. Thank you for not wasting my time. Thank you for not insulting me." She didn't know what to do with her hands. She folded them in her lap. "What do we do, sir?" "We." "Sir?" "You said we, Bennett. I noticed." Her face went hot. "I didn't mean, don't." He held up one hand. "Don't take it back. I'm not complaining. I'm just marking the moment for the record. We, then. We're going to do 3 things. First, you're going to go to the hospital. Your brother's surgery is happening right now, on schedule, with my people in the hallway and the parking garage and the cafeteria and 2 rooms down the hall. He's safe. I want to say that again so you hear it. Your brother is safe. He's going to come out of surgery in about 4 hours, and he's going to be fine. And Sam is going to sit with him, and my people are going to stay on that floor until he walks out of that hospital on his own 2 feet. Do you believe me?" "Yes, sir." "Say it back to me." "My brother is safe." "Again." "My brother is safe." "Good." Second thing, you're going to go back to work tomorrow morning like nothing happened. You're going to pour wine. You're going to clear plates. You're going to do your job exactly like you did it the last 6 months. If anybody at the house looks at you funny, you don't react. If the phone in your pocket rings, you don't answer. You call the number. You let it ring once. You hang up, same as before. Third thing, he stopped. He pulled the second leather chair around so it was directly across from hers, close enough that when he sat down, his knees were almost touching hers. He leaned forward, his forearms on his knees. His voice dropped. "At the end of that week, when somebody comes to find you for the one-word answer, you're going to give them a word, but you're not going to give them the one they expect. Do you understand what I'm telling you?" Her heart was loud in her ears. "I don't, sir." "You're going to say yes." She stared at him. "Sir." "You're going to say yes, Bennett. You're going to take the meeting. You're going to take the money. You're going to tell them whatever they want to hear, and you're going to wear a wire while you do it." For a long moment, she did not breathe. "Sir," she said. "No." "No?" "No, I can't." "Why?" "Because if they find out, they'll what?" "They'll kill me, sir. You just told me yesterday that they were going to put me in a trunk on the Belt Parkway for pouring a glass of wine. You're going to put me in a room with them and a wire?" "Yes, Bennett, that is exactly what I'm going to do." She stood up. Her hands were shaking. Her voice somehow was not. "No." "Sit down." "Sir, respectfully, no. I will not do this. I'll do anything else. I'll testify. I'll write a statement. I don't know. I'll tell you every name that man said to me on the train. I'll draw you his face. I'll sit in that library and repeat every word he said until my voice gives out. But I will not walk into a room with those people wearing a piece of electronic equipment that, if it fails, kills me. I have a brother, sir. I have a mother. I have a life I have been holding together with both hands for 7 years, and I will not throw it away. Because you think... Bennett, because you think it's a good play, sir. I won't. Bennett, sit down. She sat. Not because he had told her to. Because her knees had stopped working. He did not speak for a long moment. He just looked at her. And what was on his face when she finally made herself meet his eyes was not anger and was not impatience. It was something closer to respect and closer still to a kind of grief she did not understand. "You're right," he said. "Sir, you're right. I asked you for too much. I'm sorry." She blinked. The apology was so unexpected she did not know where to put it. "Sir, I've been doing this for a long time, Bennett. I've been doing it longer than I should have had to. One of the things that happens when you do this for a long time is you stop remembering what it costs the people you ask. I'm not going to ask you to wear a wire. I was wrong to ask. I apologize. Sir, I didn't mean to. Don't apologize back. Don't do that. You said no. You said no correctly, and for the right reasons, and I'm going to honor that. We'll find another way. Are we clear? Yes, sir. Good. He leaned back in the chair. He rubbed his jaw with one hand. The small nick from the other day was gone now, replaced by a thin line of new stubble. He looked in that moment less like a crime boss and more like a man who had not slept well in a long time and had stopped pretending otherwise. We're going to do it a different way, he said. You're going to take the meeting. That part doesn't change. You're going to take the meeting, and you're going to say yes, and you're going to start feeding them information. But the information isn't going to be real. The information is going to be something I give you. Every piece, every name, every detail. You don't improvise. You don't add. You don't subtract. You say what I tell you to say, and you say it the way I tell you to say it. Do you understand? Yes, sir. And you're not going to wear anything. No wire, no phone, no pin, no nothing. If they search you, and they will search you, they'll find nothing because there will be nothing to find. The only thing you'll carry in with you is what I put in your head. Are we clear? Yes, sir. The recording is going to come from their end, not ours. She paused. Sir, one of the men in that room is already mine. I'm not going to tell you which one. I'm not going to tell you how long. That's not your problem. Your problem is sitting in a chair and saying the words I give you, in the order I give you, without flinching. Can you do that? She thought about it. She thought about Ethan, who was, at that moment, on an operating table. She thought about her mother, who did not yet know about an account. She thought about the man in the blue wool coat who had known the name of Sam's cat. Yes, sir, she said. I can do that. Good. Sir? What? Why are you telling me this? About a man of yours in that room. You just said I wasn't supposed to know. He looked at her for a long second. Then, for the first time since she had stepped off the elevator, something that was actually a smile moved across his face. It was brief. It was tired. It was not a smile a crime boss gives a maid. It was a smile a man gives a woman he has decided, in that exact second and not 1 second before, to stop treating like a maid. Because I trust you, Bennett. Sir, I trust you. That's the answer to the question you asked me in the library last week. I didn't have the word for it then. I have it now. She didn't know what to say to that. She didn't try. He stood up. The conversation, she understood, was over. He crossed to the door, opened it, and the man with the scar was already there in the hall, waiting. Take her to the hospital, Luca said. 4th floor, west wing. Tell them she's cleared. Anything she asks for, she gets. Anything her brother needs, he gets. Anything the girlfriend needs, she gets. Cash, coffee, a change of clothes, a hotel room across the street. I don't care. Whatever they need. Then bring her home at the end of the day. My home, not hers. We're putting her in the staff quarters tonight. Her mother, too. Pick the mother up from Jackson Heights at 4. Don't alarm her. Don't let her bring anything she doesn't need. Tell her daughter asked. Are we clear? Clear, boss. Bennett, sir. I'll see you at the house tonight. Yes, sir. Go. She went. The hospital was a blur. The 4th floor smelled like bleach and coffee, and the faint, sweet, awful smell of hospital flowers. And Sam was in the waiting room exactly where the man on the train had said she would be, sitting in a vinyl chair with her legs tucked up under her and a paper cup of vending machine coffee going cold in her hand. When she saw Ava, she stood up so fast the cup tipped and spilled down the front of Ethan's flannel shirt, and she didn't even notice. Ava, oh my God. Ava, where have you been? I've been trying to call you. The nurse said, he's in surgery? He went in 40 minutes ago. They said 4 to 6 hours. Ava, what's going on? Who are these men? I don't know if you can see them, but there's a man by the elevators and a man by the stairwell and a woman at the nurse's station who is definitely not a nurse. She keeps, Ava, what did you do? Sit down, Sammy. Ava, sit down, please. Sam sat down. Ava sat down beside her. She took Sam's free hand in both of hers, and she held it, and she let Sam cry, quietly, against her shoulder for the better part of a minute. Ava did not cry. Ava had done her crying on 2nd Avenue. Ava had a different job now. He's going to be okay, she said into Sam's hair. He's going to be okay. Listen to me, Sammy. Look at me. He's going to be okay. The surgeon is the best in the city. The anesthesiologist trained at Mass General. The room they're working in was paid for by someone who could afford it. The men by the elevator and the stairwell are there so that nobody walks onto this floor who isn't supposed to be on this floor. Do you understand? Ava, is this something bad? Are we in trouble? Are you in trouble? I'm going to be honest with you, Sam. I might be. I don't know yet. Oh, God. But Ethan is not. Ethan is going to walk out of this hospital in 10 days with a scar down his chest and a new valve in his heart, and he is going to go home with you. And he is going to finish the degree he started and didn't finish, and he is going to marry you. Eventually, probably in a backyard somewhere, because neither of you likes churches, and neither of you is going to spend another day in your life being afraid of the stairs. Are you listening? Ava? Are you listening, Sammy? Sam nodded into her shoulder. Good. They sat like that for a long time. At some point, somebody, Ava didn't see who, brought them fresh coffee in actual cups from a place that wasn't a vending machine and a bag of pastries that nobody ate. At some point, a woman who was not a nurse came and sat down on the other side of Sam and introduced herself as someone who worked for Mr. Moretti's office and asked very quietly what size clothes Sam wore and made a note on a phone and left. At some point, Ava's mother came up the hall on somebody's arm. A small, tired woman in a purple coat she'd had for 15 years, her eyes frightened. And when she saw Ava, she said her name the way mothers say their daughter's name when they don't know yet whether to be angry or afraid. And Ava stood up and walked into her arms and held her, and did not explain, and did not cry, and just said over and over, "He's okay, Mama. He's okay. He's in good hands. He's okay. He's going to be okay." The surgery took 5 hours and 20 minutes. At the end of it, a woman in scrubs came out through the double doors and stood in front of them and pulled down her mask and smiled. And the smile was a real one, tired but real. And she said that Ethan had done beautifully, that the valve had taken, that his heart was already pumping stronger than it had in 3 years, that he would be in the ICU overnight for observation and then on the floor for a week, and that his prognosis, the word she used, was excellent. Sam collapsed. Ava's mother collapsed. Ava did not collapse. Ava stood up and shook the surgeon's hand and said thank you and asked when they could see him. And the surgeon said in about an hour, when he's stable, and then Ava walked 10 feet down the hall into an empty stairwell and sat down on the second step and put her face in her hands and let out one long, shuddering breath that had been sitting in her chest since the dinner party. When she came back out into the hall, the man with the scar was waiting for her. "Miss Bennett." "He's okay. I know, I heard." A small, almost gentle pause. "Mr. Moretti sends his congratulations." "Thank you. He says to take all the time you need here, and he'll send a car when you're ready. Tell him I'll be ready at 9. "Yes, ma'am." Ma'am. Nobody had ever called her ma'am in her life. She pretended not to notice. She went in to see Ethan at 8:15. He was still mostly asleep from the anesthesia, his face drained of color, a thin tube under his nose, monitors singing quietly on either side of the bed, a bandage taped down the center of his chest under the thin hospital gown. Sam was already there, sitting on the other side of the bed, holding his hand with both of hers. Their mother was in a chair in the corner, asleep with her chin on her chest. Ava stood at the foot of the bed and looked at her brother for a long time. She thought about the corner of 2nd and 64th. She thought about 10 seconds. She did not let herself think about them for longer than that. She left the hospital at 9 sharp. The black car was at the curb, and the man with the scar was holding the door, and she got in without a word and pressed her forehead against the window again and watched the lights of Manhattan slide past. She did not cry. She was past that now. She was thinking about words. The car took her not to the staff quarters, but up into the penthouse itself, through a private elevator she had not known existed, one that bypassed the service floor entirely. The doors opened onto a hallway she had never seen, pale stone underfoot, low lamps in niches along the wall, the smell of old wood and fresh flowers, and, very faintly, cigar smoke from a room somewhere down the hall. Luca was waiting for her at the end of the corridor. He was in the white shirt again. No shoes, dark trousers, a glass of red wine in his hand and another glass already poured on the table beside him. He looked up when she came around the corner, and for a moment, just a moment, He did not look like a man who owned half the waterfront and buried his enemies in the harbor. He looked like a tired man at the end of a very long day, waiting for someone to come home. Bennett. Sir? How is he? He's going to make it. Good. Thank you. Don't. She almost smiled. She almost, for the first time since the dinner party, had a thing in her face that wanted to be a smile. She didn't let it. She was too tired, and the day had been too big, and the thing she had come here to do was too serious. Sir? Come sit. Drink something. Sir, Bennett, come sit. You can say no to the wine. You cannot say no to sitting. You've been on your feet since 6 in the morning. She sat. The room was a small one. A study, maybe. Or a private sitting room. A fire in the grate. 2 low chairs. A chessboard on a table between them, mid-game, white, losing badly. She did not ask who he had been playing with. He saw her look at the board and he shook his head. Myself, I play myself when I can't sleep. Who's winning? Neither of us. That's the problem. This time she did smile. Barely. The corner of her mouth, and only for a second, but he caught it, and something in his shoulders eased a fraction. Drink the wine, Bennett. It's been a day. She took the glass. She did not drink yet. She held it in both hands like a cup of soup and watched the firelight move on the surface. Sir? Yes. I've been thinking. In the car. About? About the meeting. About the week. About what I'm going to say. He waited. I don't think I can just say what you tell me to say, sir. His eyes went very still. Explain. I'm not refusing. Sir, I'm not trying to renegotiate. I'm trying to help. I'm trying to help do this right. She set the glass down. She leaned forward. If I walk into a room with those people and I recite a script, they'll know. They'll know in 2 minutes. They're not stupid, sir. The man on the train this morning was not stupid. He knew the name of my sister-in-law's cat. He knew what coffee Sam drinks. These are not people I can lie to by reading off a page in my head. I'll crack. I'll stumble. I'll say a name half a beat too slow, and they'll feel it. And then I'll be a girl in a room with 4 men who know I'm lying to them. Bennett. So what I'm thinking, sir, is, what if some of what I tell them is true? He looked at her. Go on. Not the important things. Not the names that matter. Not the things they'd hurt you with. But the small things. The things that are already going to be true by the time I say them. Things they can check. Things they can confirm through their own people. If everything I tell them is a lie, sir, they'll catch one. If 8 out of 10 things I tell them are true, and the 2 that aren't are the ones that matter, they won't catch anything. They'll catch themselves. He was very still. Who taught you to think like that? Nobody, sir. I'm making it up as I go. Sir, I can do this. I can. But I can't read a script. I need to be the one telling the story. He studied her for a long moment. The firelight moved across the lines of his face, and she noticed, maybe for the first time, how young he was. How young under the tiredness, and under the charcoal suits, and under the word boss that everyone used when they spoke to him. He was 29 years old. He had been doing this, in one form or another, since he was 17. She did not know that yet. She would know it later. All right, Bennett. Sir? All right. Your way. We'll do it your way. You tell the story. I'll tell you which lines matter. The rest is yours. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me, sir. Drink the wine, Bennett. She drank the wine. It was better than any wine she had ever poured in that dining room. It tasted like a country she had never been to, and like a future she was not yet allowed to want, and she held the glass in both hands and let the warmth of it move down into her chest and across the small table. The man who had claimed her in front of his enemies looked at her over the rim of his own glass and did not say anything at all. Outside the window, the snow had started again. It fell past the glass in long, slow curtains, and it did not reach them. Up here, it never did. The week went by the way weeks go by when you're counting them. Slowly, and then all at once. Ava did not sleep in the staff quarters after that first night. Luca had moved her and her mother into a small guest suite on the 48th floor, 2 rooms with a connecting door and a view of the river, and he had told Mrs. Calloway to schedule her for half shifts until further notice. Ava had not argued. She had not argued because Ethan was being moved out of the ICU, and Sam was being put up in a hotel she didn't have to pay for, and her mother was, for the first time in maybe 9 years, sleeping through the night. There were some kinds of help you did not argue with. She had learned that much in 6 days. She still poured the wine. That was a thing she and Luca had both agreed on without ever quite saying so out loud. Whatever had shifted in that small study on the night of the surgery, whatever had passed between them in front of the fire, neither of them had named it yet, and neither of them was going to. It lived in the spaces between sentences now. It lived in the way he said her last name instead of her first when there were other people in the room, and in the way he said her first name instead of her last when there weren't. It lived in the fact that he had started, without telling her, leaving a thermos of good coffee in the staff pantry every morning at 5:45, the kind of coffee that did not come from the staff kitchen, and Mrs. Calloway pretended not to notice, and Elena pretended not to notice, and Ava pretended not to notice hardest of all. On Wednesday night, 3 days before the meeting, Luca called her up to the library. It was 9:30 when she pushed the door open. He was in the far chair with his feet up on the low table, in socks, one of which had a hole at the toe. There were papers spread out across the table, and across his lap, and across the arm of the chair, and his hair was pushed up on one side like he'd been running his hand through it for an hour. She almost smiled. Again. She was getting bad about this. "You summoned me, sir." "Don't make it sound like that. Sit down." She sat. He pulled his feet off the table and sat up and gathered the papers into a rough pile, and she saw, as he did, that some of them were photographs, grainy surveillance camera stills, faces she didn't recognize, and some of them were handwritten in Italian, in a small slanted handwriting she guessed was his, and some of them were printouts of bank statements with whole columns redacted in marker. "These are the men who are going to be in the room with you on Saturday," he said. "I want you to look at the faces. I don't want you to memorize them. I just want you to look at them enough so that when you walk in, nothing surprises you. Surprise is the one thing I need you to not show. Can you do that?" She nodded. She pulled the photographs toward her. She looked. The first one was the man from the train. The blue wool coat was gone, but the beard was the same, and the watch was the same. His name, according to the note paper-clipped to the photo, was Anton Reyes. He was 37. He had done 18 months in Allenwood for wire fraud in his 20s. He was not the one she needed to worry about. The second one was older, heavier. A dark suit, a gold ring on the little finger. Not the same ring as Reza Farah's, but close enough in style that Ava understood, looking at it, that it was a signal. This man's name was Teodoro Benedetti. He had, according to the paper clipped to him, killed 4 people that the federal government could prove, and an unknown larger number they could not. He was the one she was going to have to look in the eye when she said yes. The third one was a woman. Ava stopped. "Sir?" "Yes." "There's a woman in the meeting?" "There is." "You didn't mention a woman." "I didn't know until an hour ago. That's why you're up here tonight and not tomorrow." Ava looked at the photo. The woman was in her 40s, maybe 50. Silver blonde hair cut in a sharp bob, a cream suit, a face that gave nothing away. Her name on the paper was Mira Kastner. Under her name, in Luca's slanted handwriting, were 2 words: "Be careful." Who is she? She's the one who pays, not Reza, not Teodoro, her. She's the one with the checkbook. She's the one who has, according to information I got from a man I trust more than almost anyone in my life, personally signed off on every move against me in the last 9 months. She's been behind Reza the whole time. Reza is, how do I put this? Reza is loud. Mira is not. Mira does not raise her voice. Mira does not curse. Mira has never been photographed in the same building as anyone on her payroll. The fact that she's going to be in the room on Saturday means one of 2 things. Either she thinks the deal is important enough to be there herself, or she thinks the deal is finished and she's coming to look at your face. Ava felt the hair on the back of her neck go up. "Which one do you think, sir?" "I think it's the first, but I wanted you to know it could be the second." "Okay." Ava. It was the first time he had used her first name in a professional context, not over a glass of wine by a fire, not in passing in a hallway, in the library, in a working conversation across the pile of surveillance photos. He said her name like a line he was drawing. She looked up. "You can still walk away from this." "Sir, I want you to hear me. I want you to listen to what I'm about to say, and I want you to know that I mean it. You can walk away. Right now. Tonight." You get in the car takes you and your mother and Sam and Ethan to an airport I use for things like this, and by tomorrow morning, the four of you are in a country where nobody has ever heard of Reza Farah or Mira Kastner or me. Ethan gets his follow-up care. Your mother gets her account. Sam gets to keep being in love with your brother without worrying about men on trains. And you get out. You walk into a life where you don't have to sit across from Mira Kastner on Saturday and lie to her face. And you? Me what? Where do you go? He looked at her for a long moment. He did not answer. Sir, where do you go? I stay. And what happens to you if I walk away? That's not your problem, Bennett. It's my question. He was quiet again. The fire in the grate had burned down to embers. He looked at her like he was deciding how much to say, and then slowly, he said all of it. If you walk away, I lose the meeting. If I lose the meeting, I lose the recording. If I lose the recording, I lose my leverage over Mira, and over the three men who sit at her right hand, and over the network of people in this city who are currently deciding whether I am strong enough to still be in the chair I'm in. If they decide I'm not, they move. If they move, I have about 6 weeks, maybe 8. That's my honest estimate. After that, somebody shoots me as a parking garage or poisons me in a restaurant, and the business goes to my cousin, who is a worse man than I am, and who would not, for the record, have lifted a finger to pay for your brother's surgery. That's the answer to your question. She sat with that. Sir? Yes. I'm not walking away. Ava. I'm not. I'm sorry. I'm not. I need you to understand what you just said. I understand. Say it to me again. I'm not walking away. He leaned back in his chair. He put his hands flat over his face for a second, like a man trying to rub the exhaustion out of his eyes, and when he lowered them, his face was bare in a way she had never seen on him before. Something had come loose at the edges. She looked at him and realized, with a small shock, that he had been prepared for her to say yes. He had been prepared for the last 7 days for her to take the out. Part of him had wanted her to take the out. The part of him that had said her name at a dinner table without meaning to had been quietly, desperately, hoping she would walk out of this room tonight and never come back. The other part of him was looking at her now like she had just saved his life. All right, he said quietly. Sir? All right. Then we work. They worked until almost 2 in the morning. He walked her through every beat of the meeting, where she would sit, where they would sit, who would speak first, who would ask the questions that mattered, and who would ask the questions that didn't. He taught her how to hold her hands, loosely, not folded, because folded hands looked like a woman who had practiced, and how to look at Mira Kastner without looking away too fast and without looking too long. He taught her 3 names that were real. He taught her 2 names that were not. He taught her 1 date that he wanted her to let slip, as if by accident, 2/3 of the way through the meeting. The 11th, I think he said the 11th. He was on the phone in the library and I was clearing the coffee. A date that was not his real date, that was not any date at all. That was a small, invented thing whose only purpose was to see which of the 4 people in the room reacted. If Mira reacts, he said, we learn something. If Teodoro reacts, we learn something else. If Anton reacts, we learn he's been told more than he should have been. If nobody reacts, we learn the most important thing of all, which is that it's already over, that she already decided about me before you walked in, that the meeting is not a negotiation, that it's an execution with paperwork. Okay? Are you still not walking away, Bennett? Still not, sir. At 1 in the morning, he stopped and made her stand up and poured her a glass of water from a silver pitcher on the sideboard and made her drink all of it and sat her back down in the chair. At 1:30, he started asking her questions in the voice he thought Mira Kastner would use. A quiet, unhurried voice, the voice of a woman who had never been interrupted in her life. And Ava answered them in the version of herself they had built together, and he corrected her when she smiled too much, and when she smiled too little, and when she tried to sell a lie with her eyes instead of with her voice. At 1:45, he told her the single most important thing he would tell her that week. Ava, sir, when you sit down at that table, remember one thing. These people are not smarter than you. They are more experienced. They are more dangerous. They have killed more human beings than you have met in your life. But they are not smarter than you. Do you understand the difference? I think so, sir. Experience can be anticipated. Danger can be survived. Smart is the only thing in a room that can't be beaten. You, Bennett, are the smartest person who's going to be at that table on Saturday. I know because I've been watching you for 7 days, and I watch people for a living. Do you hear me? Yes, sir. Good. Go to bed. Sir? Yes. Thank you. Don't. She almost said it anyway. She didn't. Saturday came. The meeting was set for 2 in the afternoon, in a private dining room above a restaurant on the Upper East Side. Not a restaurant owned by anyone in the business, which was the point. And Ava rode up in a cab by herself because that was how it had to look. Luca's people were on the block. She did not know where. She had been told to assume they were in the restaurant itself, in the building across the street, on the roof, on foot, and she had been told not to look for them, because looking for them would mean that someone else would also look for them, and would find them. She did not look. She wore a black sweater and black slacks, and a gray wool coat she had borrowed from Mrs. Calloway, who had, on her way out the door, surprised Ava by stepping forward and pressing the little silver pendant back into her hand. "I don't need this," Mrs. Calloway had said. "You do." Ava had put it on. She did not press it. Not yet. The restaurant was the kind of place where the host did not ask you for your reservation name. A man in a dark suit was standing at the foot of a narrow staircase behind the bar, and when he saw her, he simply stepped aside. She went up the stairs. The stairs creaked on the 7th step. She remembered that later because it was the last normal sound she heard before the door at the top opened, and there were 4 people sitting at a round table in a small private room, and one of them, the woman with the silver blonde bob, stood up when she came in, and smiled, and put out her hand. "Miss Bennett?" "Ma'am." "Mira, please." "Mira." "Sit down. Would you like wine?" "No, thank you." "Coffee?" "No, thank you." "Water?" "Yes, please." Mira poured the water herself. She did it the way a hostess would do it at a dinner party for friends. A small silver pitcher, a crystal glass, a slice of lemon from a little dish beside it. She set the glass in front of Ava. She sat back down. She folded her hands on the table in front of her. Not tight, not loose, a hostess's hands, and she smiled again. And the smile did not move her eyes at all. "Thank you for coming, Miss Bennett. Thank you for having me. You had a week to think about our offer. Do you have an answer for us?" Ava did not look at Anton. She did not look at Teodoro. She did not look at the 4th man at the table, whose name she did not know, whose face was not in any of the photographs, and who had not spoken since she walked in. She looked at Mira. "Yes," she said. Mira nodded once. "Good. I have some questions. Please." And here was the thing Luca had not quite prepared her for. The thing she had come to understand only that morning, staring at herself in the bathroom mirror of the 48th floor guest suite, with her mother still asleep in the next room. If she walked into this meeting as a woman who had accepted an offer, Mira would smell the performance in 60 seconds. What Mira was going to trust, Ava had realized, was not a woman who said yes. Mira was going to trust a woman who said yes, and then started negotiating for more. Greed was believable. Gratitude was not. "I'd like clarification," Ava said, "on the payment structure." Mira's head tilted, just slightly. The smile stayed put, but something behind her eyes got a little sharper. She was paying attention now. She was paying attention in a way she had not been paying attention a minute ago. "Go on." "Your man on the train said $2 million. Correct. He didn't say when. What would you like to propose, Miss Bennett?" "I'd like half now." A small silence at the table. Teodoro shifted his weight in his chair. Anton, on Mira's left, did not move. "Half?" Mira said. "Half now. In an account I choose. In a bank I choose. Half when I give you what you've asked for. I want the first half before I say a single word about my employer. I want it in the account before I leave this building today. And I want it in cash equivalent instruments, not a wire I can't verify before tonight. That's not how we usually... I know it isn't, but I'm not one of your usual people." Mira looked at her for a long, quiet moment. "No," Mira said. "You're not. I have my brother to think about. I have my mother. I've been promised things before by men with more money than me, and the things didn't come, and I stopped believing in things that don't come until they do. If you want what I have, you pay me half of it before I open my mouth. If you don't, I stand up, I leave, and I go back to pouring wine for the rest of my life, which, frankly, I'm pretty good at." She kept her hands loose on the table. She did not fold them. She did not look at anyone but Mira. She did not smile. Mira smiled instead. It was, this time, a real one, or real in the way a knife is real. "All right, Miss Bennett. Thank you. 1 million now. 1 million on delivery. We'll need a name and a number for the account." "I have both." "Of course you do." Ava slid a small folded piece of paper across the table. Mira took it with 2 fingers. She opened it. She read it. She nodded once at the fourth man at the table, the one who had not yet spoken, and he stood up without a word, walked out of the private dining room, and closed the door behind him. "He'll confirm the transfer in about 20 minutes, Mira said. "In the meantime, we can talk." "Yes. Tell me about the dinner." And this was where it started. This was where, for the next 41 minutes, Ava Bennett, housemaid, 23, 5 months of community college under her belt, 0 hours of federal witness training, sat across from 4 of the most dangerous people she had ever been in a room with and told them a story. She told them the story Luca had helped her build. She told them pieces of it in the wrong order, the way a real witness would. She backtracked. She corrected herself. She said, "Wait. No, I'm sorry. That was the other night twice. Both times on purpose. Both times on lines Luca had marked in red on the pages in his library." She said real names she had actually heard at the actual dinner party that had started all of this. Small men, men who were already cooperating with him behind the scenes, men whose exposure would cost him nothing. She said 2 names that did not exist at all. Salvaggio, Ricci. Names Luca had invented for her, names that meant nothing. Names whose only purpose was to see whether anyone at the table had heard of them. Mira's face did not move when Ava said Salvaggio. Mira's face did not move when Ava said Ricci. Teodoro's face, though. Teodoro's face moved very slightly at Ricci. Not much. A tightening around the mouth, a very small breath out through the nose. A man who had heard a name and was pretending he hadn't. Ava did not look at him when it happened. She kept her eyes on Mira. She kept talking. At the 22-minute mark, she said the date. The 11th. She said it the way Luca had taught her, not as a headline, but as a detail, buried in the middle of a longer sentence about clearing coffee cups from the library while Luca was on a phone call. She said it, and she moved past it, and she did not pause for a reaction. Anton shifted in his seat. Mira did not move. Teodoro did not move. The 4th chair was still empty. Ava kept talking. At the 30-minute mark, the 4th man came back. He did not sit down. He walked behind Mira's chair, leaned down, and murmured something in her ear that was 1 sentence long. Mira nodded once. The 4th man straightened up. He did not look at Ava. He walked back to his chair and sat down. The transfer had gone through. Ava did not react. She kept talking. She was explaining, in the version of the story they had built together, how Luca had spoken about the Baltimore arrangement on a phone call she had overheard while polishing silver, an arrangement that did not exist, that had never existed, but that sounded exactly like the kind of thing that would exist for a man in his position, and that contained, hidden inside it like a splinter, a specific dollar figure that only 3 men in Luca's entire organization knew about. 3 men. If she walked out of this room alive, and that dollar figure surfaced in the next 10 days in any conversation anywhere in the city, they would know which of the 3 had talked. That was the real play. The Salvaggio and Ricci names had been a test. The date had been a test. The dollar figure was a trap. And Mira, who was watching Ava's mouth like a woman reading a book she had already bought, did not yet know she was inside it. At the 39-minute mark, Mira held up one hand. "That's enough for today, Miss Bennett. I can keep going." "I know you can. You're very thorough. That's enough for today. We'll be in touch for the second half next week. I'll send somebody you haven't met. Don't look for me. Don't call me. Don't come back to this restaurant. If you need to reach us, Anton will find you." "Understood. One more thing." "Yes." "You're going to keep working for him." "Yes." "For how long?" "For as long as you need me to." Mira smiled again. "Good girl." The words were small. The words should have been small. Ava had heard worse words from worse men in worse rooms, but something about good girl in Mira Kastner's unhurried voice, in that private room above a restaurant on the Upper East Side, with $1 million newly sitting in an account in her mother's name, did something to Ava's spine that she would remember for a long time afterward. It went cold the way a fish in a freezer goes cold. It went cold and stayed cold all the way down. She smiled back. She did not show her teeth. "Thank you, Mira." "Thank you, Miss Bennett." She stood up. Anton stood up. He walked her to the door. He opened it. He did not touch her. He did not escort her down the stairs. He just watched her from the top landing as she went down. 7 steps, a creak on the 7th. And he did not close the door until she had passed the host stand at the foot of the stairs and reached the restaurant's front vestibule. She did not look back. She pushed through the door into the cold. The sidewalk was wet with melted snow. A cab was idling at the curb. The driver, when she got in, did not ask her where she was going. He just pulled into traffic and took the route she had been told the cab would take, north, then west, then south again, a long loop through the park. And Ava pressed her forehead against the cold glass of the back window and felt, very slowly, the first real shake start in her hands. She let it come. She did not fight it. She had been holding her hand still for 41 minutes, and her body wanted its minute back, and she let it have it. She shook in the back of the cab for about 90 seconds, her teeth chattering, her eyes wet, her breath coming fast. Then it passed. Then she sat up, wiped her face with the sleeve of Mrs. Calloway's gray wool coat, and pulled the little pendant out from under her sweater. She did not press it 3 times. She pressed it twice. The second signal. The one that meant, "It's done. I'm out. I'm alive." The cab took her back. Luca was in the library when she came through the door. He was standing at the window with his back to her, hands in his pockets, and when he heard her come in, he did not turn around right away. He turned around slowly, like a man who had not been sure, right up to that moment, whether she was going to come through that door on her own feet or on a stretcher. And when he saw her, upright, pale, shaking only a little, coat still buttoned to her throat, something went out of his shoulders that he had been holding since Saturday morning. "Ava, sir." "You're all right." "Yes, sir." He crossed the room in 4 long strides. He did not touch her. He stopped maybe 2 feet away. He looked at her face. He looked at her hands, loose at her sides. He looked at her eyes. "Tell me." She told him. Everything. The pitcher of water, the handshake, the negotiation for the half now, half later. Teodoro's face when she said Ricci. Anton's shoulder when she said the 11th. The dollar figure she had planted, buried inside a fake arrangement that did not exist, that would tell him within 10 days which of the 3 men in his inner circle was the leak. She told him about the 4th man who had left the room and come back and murmured something to Mira. She told him about Good Girl. When she got to Good Girl, his jaw moved. He did not interrupt. When she was done, he exhaled, slowly, through his nose. "Ava." "Sir." "Look at me." She looked at him. "You didn't just survive today." "Sir." "You won today." "I don't feel like I won, sir." "You won't for a while. That's how it works. You'll feel it in about 3 days, maybe a week. Tomorrow you're going to wake up, and you're going to want to throw up, and you're going to want to sleep for 14 hours, and you're going to feel like you did something terrible, and you didn't. You walked into a room with 4 killers, and you came out alive with $1 million in your mother's name and a trap set inside their own heads. That is not a thing I could have done at your age. That is not a thing most of the men who work for me could have done today. Do you hear me?" "Yes, sir." "Say it back." "I won today." "Good." He was very close now. She had not noticed him closing the distance. She looked up at him, actually up, because he was taller than her by 4 or 5 inches, and she had spent 6 months keeping her chin tucked in rooms he was in. And for the first time since she had met him, she looked at his mouth. She did not mean to. She looked away fast. He saw it. He did not comment. He did not lean in. He did not do any of the things a lesser man would have done. In a library, at the end of a day like that, with a woman who had just saved his life standing 2 feet in front of him with her coat still buttoned to her throat. He took 1 step back. He put his hands back in his pockets. He cleared his throat quietly once. "Go to your mother, Ava." "Sir?" "Go to your mother. Tell her you're okay. Eat something. Sleep. I'll see you tomorrow." "Yes, sir." She turned to go. She had her hand on the door. "Ava." She stopped. She did not turn around. She could not at that moment quite turn around. "Yes, sir. I'm glad you didn't walk away." She did not answer. She did not have to. She pulled the library door closed behind her, and she walked down the quiet hallway in Mrs. Calloway's gray wool coat, with $1 million in an account in her mother's name, and the cold shadow of a silver-blonde woman still at the base of her spine, and somewhere behind her, 52 floors up, a man who had not held her hand and had not touched her face and had not said anything he could not take back was standing alone in his library with his forehead pressed against the cold glass of the window, looking down at a city that was, for the first time in a long time, not entirely his. The shaking came back around 3 in the morning, the way Luca had told her it would. Ava woke up in the dark in the 48th floor guest suite with the sheets wrapped around her legs and her heart pounding in her ears. And she sat up in bed, and she did not throw up, but she came close. And she sat there for a long time, with her knees pulled up to her chest and her forehead pressed against them, and she breathed. Her mother was in the next room. She could hear the small, even sound of her mother's breathing through the connecting door, and she held on to it like a rope. In, out, in, out. Her mother was safe. Ethan was safe. Sam was safe. Whatever she had walked into on Saturday, whatever Mira Kastner had decided about her, she had walked out of it with her family on the right side of a door that locked, and nobody was going to take that away from her tonight. She thought she would not sleep again. She slept eventually. The way you sleep after something like that, not really sleeping, falling through it. When she woke up, it was almost 11, and there was a note slipped under her door. Library. When you're up, no rush. She showered. She put on clothes she had started to recognize as hers. A gray sweater she had bought herself 2 weeks ago from a shop she could not previously have afforded. Jeans, soft flat shoes that did not make a sound. And she took the back stairs up the 4 floors to the penthouse and walked down the east hall with her hand loose at her side. The library door was open. Luca was not alone. There was a man she had not seen before sitting across from him in the leather chair she usually sat in. 40s. Gray in his hair, a dark suit that had not been made on this continent. When Ava came around the corner and saw him, he stood up. Not fast, not slow, just respectful. And Luca looked up and said, "Ava, come in. This is Don Alessio. He flew in last night." "Signora." The man took her hand. He did not kiss it. He held it for a half second and let it go. "It is a pleasure." "Sir, sit, please. We are almost finished." She sat, at Luca's gesture, on the small leather bench by the window. The two men went back to their conversation in a low, quick Italian she did not understand. She watched Luca's face while they talked. He looked this morning different. Something had slept inside him last night that had not slept in a long time. The tiredness was still at the edges, but the coiled thing behind his eyes had loosened by a notch. She understood, watching him, that the previous night's work had already begun to move. Somewhere, in some quiet room in the city, the dollar figure she had planted had surfaced. Somewhere, one of the 3 men who had known it had already said the wrong thing to the wrong person. Somewhere, Mira Kastner had made a phone call whose content Luca already knew. The old man stood. Luca stood with him. They embraced, briefly, 2 dry kisses on the cheeks, the kind of embrace that was both an affection and a contract. And then the old man turned to Ava and inclined his head. "Signora Bennett, my compliments." "Sir, you have done a hard thing, very hard. Men 3 times your age could not do it. I wanted to meet you before I went home. Now I have. You will be all right." He was gone before she could answer. Luca closed the door behind him. He turned. He leaned against the door for a second, and he let out a breath. And then he walked across the room and sat down in the chair the old man had left, and he put his head in his hands for about 10 seconds. When he lifted it, he was almost smiling. "Ava." "Sir." "It's done." She did not move. "Sir, it's done. 10 days early. I thought it would take until Friday. It took until last night. The dollar figure surfaced at dinner in a private room in Brooklyn around 9. The man who said it is, as of about 4 in the morning, somewhere very far from this city, with his family, with a new name, and with the understanding that if he ever comes back, we will not be having another conversation. Teodoro Benedetti was picked up by the federal government at his home in Connecticut at 6. That was not my doing. That was the result of a recording made last night in a private dining room above a restaurant on the Upper East Side, which somehow, and I cannot say how, it is a mystery, found its way into the hands of a federal prosecutor who has been looking for a reason to move on him for 2 years. Mira Kastner is on a plane. I don't know to where. She'll land somewhere she thinks is safe, and for a while it will be. Eventually she'll come back. People like her always do. But not for a long time, not for a year. Maybe 2. And the reason she left, Ava. The reason she left the country without a single phone call to any of her people in this city is you. She could not speak. Me, you. She didn't leave because of Teodoro. She'll write Teodoro off as a cost of doing business. She left because the dollar figure surfaced in the wrong mouth, and it didn't surface from Teodoro, and it didn't surface from Reza, and the only person outside her own circle who had ever said that number to anyone was you. You, in that room, in that chair, buried inside a fake story she believed. She understood what that meant the minute her own people told her where the number had come from, and she understood that if a housemaid had outplayed her on a Saturday afternoon, then I had outplayed her for months, and the rest of the city was going to know it by Tuesday. So she left. She took what she could carry, and she left. Do you understand what you did? I think so, sir. No, you don't. Not yet. You will. Come here. She came. She stood in front of the leather chair. He did not stand. He reached up, slowly, without any of the speed she had learned to expect in the house, and he took her hand, and he held it, and he pressed her palm flat for a second against his own, the way you press a hand against a hand to measure it, and he let it go. Thank you. Sir. Thank you, Ava. Her eyes were wet. She hated that. She blinked it away. You're welcome, sir. Sit down. I want to ask you something. She sat. Not on the bench this time. On the arm of the other leather chair, because the other leather chair was too far away, and because she was quietly tired of distance. He did not comment. He did not look at her sideways for it. What do you want, Ava? Sir? Now, today, tomorrow. What do you want? Because I owe you something I cannot pay in money, and I am not going to insult you by trying, but I can do almost any other thing on this earth for you, and I am asking you what you want, and I want you to take a minute and answer honestly. She was quiet for a long time. Sir, I want to finish school. Done. I want... She paused. I want my brother to have a life, a real one, not just the surgery, the rehab, the follow-up, the cardiologist for as long as he needs her, and I want him to be able to go back to school without worrying about money. Done. I want my mother to stop working. She's 61. She's been on her feet since she was 17. I want her to sit down. Done. Sir? Ava. I want to work. He raised an eyebrow. Explain. I don't want to be kept, sir. I'm grateful. God, I'm grateful. More than you will ever know. But I will not sit in a guest suite on the 48th floor and live off your money. That isn't who I am. I worked my first job when I was 16, and I have worked every day since, and if you take that from me, I will not know what to do with myself. I don't want to pour wine anymore, sir. I'm done pouring wine. But I want to work. I want to build something. He looked at her for a long moment. What would you want to build? I don't know yet. Try. Sir, this week, these last 2 weeks, I've been thinking about things I didn't used to think about. I've been thinking about the money. I've been thinking about who has it. I've been thinking about what Mira Kastner actually does, underneath the name and the suit and the meetings. I've been thinking about how much of what happens in this city happens, because there are people who do not have $86,000, and people who do, and almost nothing in between. I don't want to be Mira Kastner, sir. I don't want to be anywhere near her. But I think about the girl I was 6 months ago, the one who was saving her tips in a coffee can under the sink because she didn't trust banks, because she didn't think banks were for people like her. And I think about how close she came to saying yes on a train to a man she didn't know. Not because she was a bad person, because she was a tired one. And I think, sir, that I would like to build something. I don't know what yet, a program, a foundation, something that catches people like her before they have to make that choice. That's all. I don't have it figured out. I'm just telling you what keeps coming back. He watched her for a long time. All right, Ava. Sir? All right. We'll figure it out. There's a lot in this house that is going to change over the next year. I've been thinking about it for longer than I've been willing to admit. Don Alessio and I were talking about it this morning. There are pieces of what I do that I do not want to keep doing. There are pieces that were never supposed to be permanent, that I inherited, that I kept because I was 23 and scared, and because I didn't know yet what the difference was between a man who runs things and a man who is run by them. I know the difference now. I've known it for about 8 days. I would like to spend the next 10 years turning this house into something my father would have hated, and something his father would have hated more, and something your brother's children, if he has them, could walk into without feeling ashamed. I don't know yet how to do that. I am asking you because I trust you, and because I owe you, and because you are the smartest person I have ever had the privilege of being lied to by, to help me figure it out. She laughed. She laughed out loud, in the library, in the late morning, a short, surprised, uneven laugh, and the corner of his mouth moved in something that was almost the same laugh, and for the first time in 2 weeks, the air in the room felt like air. Sir? Yes? Stop calling me sir. Ava, stop. Sir isn't... We aren't. Sir, I haven't been your maid since Tuesday. We both know that. I'm going to keep calling you sir in front of the staff because that's how this house works. But when the door is closed, sir is... It's silly. It's not honest. Call me Ava. And you'll call me? Luca. It was the first time she had said his name out loud in his hearing. It sat in the air between them like a small, fragile thing. Luca, she said again, more quietly, to make sure it would still stay standing the second time. He nodded once, slowly. All right, Ava. The weeks after that moved the way weeks move in a life that is being rebuilt from the studs. Ethan came home from the hospital on a Thursday, walking on his own, a little slower than he used to, but walking, with a scar down the center of his chest that he showed Ava the way a boy shows a sister a loose tooth, proud, embarrassed, a little awed. He moved into the apartment with Sam, the one in Astoria, and he did not climb the stairs at first, and then, after 4 weeks, he did. And on the day he made it to the 4th floor without stopping, he called Ava from the landing, out of breath but laughing, and said, I did it, Ava. I did the stairs, I did the whole thing, and Ava, standing at the kitchen counter on the 48th floor peeling an apple for her mother, leaned her forehead against the cabinet door and cried, quietly, for maybe 30 seconds, and did not tell him she was crying, and then wiped her face and asked him what he wanted for his birthday. Her mother, for the first time in Ava's life, stopped working. She fought it for about 2 months. She said she wasn't the kind of woman who sat around. She said idleness made her anxious. She said the money in the account in her name was frightening, not comforting. She had never had more than $2,000 to her name at any one time in her 61 years, and watching a number with 6 figures in it sitting in her savings account gave her, she said, the willies. Ava sat with her at the kitchen table one Saturday morning and went through it, line by line, patiently, the way you teach a child to read. This is the principle. This is the interest. This is the amount you can spend every month and never touch the principal. This is what that means. This is what it means that you will never again, in your life, need to decide between electricity and groceries. This is what it means that you can visit your sister in Puerto Rico whenever you want, not once every 4 years. This is what it means that you don't have to be afraid anymore. Mama, it's okay to not be afraid. Her mother had looked at her across the table for a long time and then said, in a voice that was very small and very old, Mija, I have been afraid since 1979. Ava had held her hand. I know, she had said. That's why we're stopping. She went back to school in the fall. Not full-time. She would not have been able to handle full-time with everything else, but 2 classes at a small private university in Manhattan, in a program she had once looked at online at 2 in the morning years ago from a laptop balanced on her knees in a staff break room. Nonprofit management, social policy. The kind of degree she had not, at the time, believed belonged in a person like her. She went to her first class in September in a navy sweater and a pair of glasses she did not technically need, and she sat in the 3rd row and she took notes in a narrow, careful hand that Mrs. Calloway would have approved of. And when the professor asked the room, what brought you here? Ava thought for a moment about the corner of 2nd and 64th Avenue, and then she said aloud, I met a lot of people who needed help, and I want to be better at giving it. After class, a woman sat down next to her on the subway and said, "That answer you gave in class? That was the realest thing I've heard in 3 years of grad school. I'd like to buy you a coffee." Her name was Priya. She was 34. She had worked in city government for 9 years, was burned out, was looking for something new. By November, she was the second person Ava had hired for the foundation. The foundation had a name by then. Ava had picked it out on a legal pad, sitting at the kitchen counter one evening, chewing on the end of a pen, while Luca, across the counter, was making pasta. He had become, to Ava's ongoing surprise, a quietly excellent cook. He did not talk about where he had learned. He did not talk, actually, about a lot of the things that had made him, about the years between 17 and 23, about his father, whose photograph was in a drawer she had opened once by accident and closed again without looking at for very long. He would talk about them, eventually, over time, in small pieces she did not push for. That night, though, he was dicing garlic, and she was writing names on a legal pad, and when she finally underlined one of them, the Bridge House Initiative, and turned the pad around so he could see, he had looked at it for a long moment and set the knife down. Bridge House. It's stupid. It's a working title. It's not stupid. No? No, it's the thing my grandmother used to say. Did you know that? About my grandmother? I don't know anything about your grandmother. She used to say that every family has one person who is the bridge. One person who stands between where they came from and where they might go. And the bridge never gets to walk across itself. The bridge gets walked on. He looked at her. He smiled a little. I think she'd have liked you. Luca. Yes. I don't want to be the bridge. No? No. I want to build bridges. I don't want to be one. Somebody else can be the one who gets walked on. I'm tired of that part. He looked at her for a long moment. Good, he said. Then let's build them. The Bridge House Initiative opened its doors in April, in a converted 2-story building in Washington Heights that Luca had bought, quietly, through 3 layers of shell companies, and then, on Ava's insistence, transferred into the foundation's name outright so that no shell company owned it anymore. Ava was its director. Priya was its chief of programs. There was a staff of 7 and a volunteer network of 40, and a phone number that was answered 24 hours a day by a live human being. The work it did was small, at first. Emergency cash assistance for medical crises, rent relief for families with a sick child, legal aid for women who had walked into the wrong rooms and were trying to walk out of them, scholarship funds, a small discretionary account that Ava was the only person authorized to draw on for cases that did not fit into any of the other categories, which she called, privately, the 10 Seconds Fund, for people who were about to make a decision on a street corner they would spend the rest of their lives regretting, and who needed the 10 seconds back. They helped 43 people that first year. The next year, it was 210. The year after that, it was almost 1,000. By the end of the 5th year, the phone number that was answered 24 hours a day had its own small call center in a rented floor of an office building in Midtown, and Ava's original legal pad was framed under glass on the wall of the reception area, with the Bridge House Initiative underlined in her own handwriting. Priya had kept asking her to take it down. Ava kept saying no. She finished her degree in 3.5 years, walking across a stage in a black gown on a warm May afternoon with her mother in the second row, Ethan and Sam next to her, and Luca, in a dark suit, no tie, one button open at the throat, standing at the back of the auditorium with his hands in his pockets, and something in his face that she had not seen there before and that she would not see there again for another month. What she saw in his face on that stage was a decision. She saw it a second time on the Italian coast, a month later. They had gone because Ava's grandmother, the one whose postcard had been pinned above the sink in the kitchen in Queens, the one Ava had refused to let herself think about on the night of the dinner party, had been born in a small town on the Ligurian coast in 1937 and had never, in 58 years of American life, managed to afford to go back. She had died with the postcard still above the sink. Ava had carried it, folded, in her wallet since the day she buried her. When she told Luca about it, one night, over dinner, almost offhandedly, 3 years into whatever they were calling what they were, he had not said anything for a long moment. Then he had said, "What was the town?" And she had told him. And the next morning there had been a flight reservation on her phone, and plane tickets for her mother, and for Ethan, and for Sam, and for Priya, and for the two oldest women on the Bridge House staff. And when she had walked into the kitchen with the phone in her hand and her mouth open to protest, he had held up one finger and said, "Your grandmother waited 58 years. I'm not letting her wait another week." The town was a small one. White buildings, red roofs, a church at the top of the hill that Ava stood in front of for a long time without going in. A harbor at the bottom where the water was exactly the color of the oil painting in the Moretti dining room, and Ava stood on the seawall at sundown and looked at it for a long time, and understood, then, what she had always understood in the back of her mind without having the words for it, that the painting had been a door, that she had walked past it for 6 months in a black uniform without knowing what was on the other side of it, that the other side of it was this: a harbor, an evening, a light on water in a place her grandmother had been a girl in almost 90 years ago, in a life that had ended with a postcard above a kitchen sink in Queens. She was crying quietly on the seawall when Luca came up beside her. He did not say anything. He stood beside her, his hands in the pockets of a cream linen shirt, the sleeves rolled to the forearm, and he looked at the water with her for a long time. The sun was most of the way down. The sky was doing something pink and gold and unfair above the cliffs on the other side of the harbor. "Ava?" "Yeah. I want to ask you something." "Okay. I want to say first that you can say no. I want you to hear me. You can say no, and nothing about my life changes. Your job does not change. The foundation does not change. Your mother's account does not change. Your brother's cardiologist does not change. I'm not asking you for anything you don't want to give, and there is no version of the next 30 seconds where you say no and I love you less. Do you understand?" "Luca, do you understand?" "Yes." He took something out of his pocket. It was not a box. He had not come up to this seawall with a box in his pocket. It was a small cloth pouch, the kind of thing a man carries when the thing he has in it matters more than the presentation of it. He held it in his palm. He did not open it yet. "My grandfather," he said, "gave this to my grandmother in a village about 12 miles south of here in 1952. It is not large and it is not flashy. It is a small ring. It belonged to her mother before it belonged to her. My grandmother left it to me when she died, and I have carried it in a drawer for 9 years without knowing what I was waiting for. I know what I was waiting for now." He paused. "I'm not doing this because you saved my life. I want you to understand that. I'm not asking you to marry me because I owe you, or because you built a foundation, or because my grandmother would have liked you, although she would have. I am asking you because you are the first person I have ever met in my life who sat across a table from me and did not once, in 4 years, try to become anything other than what you already were. You have never been afraid of me. You have been afraid for me, which is a completely different thing. You look at me like a person, Ava. Do you know how rare that is? Do you know how long it has been since somebody looked at me like a person?" "Luca, let me finish. I'm not going to do this again. If you say yes, I'm never going to ask you for anything this big again. I promise. You're going to spend the rest of your life saying yes to smaller things, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to deserve them. That's the deal. Will you marry me?" She looked at him. Her face was wet. His face was also wet, she noticed, around the eyes, although he was pretending it wasn't. "Yes, Ava. Yes, Luca. Yes. Yes." He opened the pouch. The ring was small, a thin gold band, a single stone, not a diamond, something older, a pale green stone she would learn later was a chrysoberyl. And he slid it onto her finger, and it did not quite fit. The knuckle caught, and he laughed a small surprised laugh because he had not thought of that, and she laughed with him, and she wiggled it past the knuckle, and it sat, a little loose, on her hand. They stood on the seawall like that for a long time. They were married that fall, in the garden of a small inn about a mile from the harbor, in front of 40 people. Ethan walked her down the aisle. He had put on weight. He had color in his face. His girlfriend Sam, who was now his fiancée, cried through the entire ceremony and did not pretend otherwise. Ava's mother stood in the front row in a dress she had bought for herself with her own money, and when Ava walked past her, her mother reached out and touched Ava's cheek just once with a hand that did not shake. Mrs. Calloway was there. She had flown over the week before. She had cried when Ava had asked her. she had tried not to let Ava see. Priya was there. She was pregnant with her first child. She gave a speech about the first day she had met Ava on the subway, and about the answer Ava had given in class, and about what she, Priya, had been looking for when she had sat down next to a stranger on the one train, and whether she had known, on that afternoon, that she had found it. She cried through the speech. She did not apologize for crying. The room clapped for a full minute when she was done. Luca spoke last. He stood up, and he looked at Ava across the small garden, and he said, for the first time in front of witnesses, what he had said in the library 4 years earlier in a quieter voice. "I trust her," he said. "That's the whole thing. I don't know how to say it better than that. I trust her, and there are not 5 people in my life I can say that about. And I am the luckiest man at this table because she is marrying me." They did not go on a long honeymoon. Ava could not be away from the foundation for more than a week, and Luca, to his own surprise, could not be away from the work he had started doing. The slow, quiet, unglamorous work of pulling his family's business apart at the roots, piece by piece, selling off the ugly parts, folding the clean parts into legitimate holdings, writing down, over nights and nights at the kitchen counter with Ava next to him, what a 100-year-old organization was going to do now that it was going to stop doing the things that had made it. He would not finish it that year. He would not finish it the next year. He did not finish it entirely, ever. There were some things that could not be undone, some debts that could not be forgiven, some names that would never again come to dinner at the penthouse on the 52nd floor. But he did what he could. And what he could, it turned out, was a lot. Reza Farah died in a prison in Romania 6 years later. Ava learned about it on a Tuesday morning in the foundation's office, from a news alert on her phone. She closed the phone. She did not tell anyone at work. She went home that night and she told Luca over dinner, and Luca nodded slowly, once, and did not say anything, and poured her another glass of wine. Mira Kastner did come back, exactly as Luca had predicted, about 18 months after she left. She did not come back to the penthouse. She came back to a small, discreet meeting with Luca, alone, in a restaurant neither of them had been to before. And whatever was said in that meeting, neither Luca nor anyone else ever repeated. After it, she went to live in Geneva. She was never, as far as Ava knew, in the same building as any of them again. Years later, when someone from the Bridge House Initiative tried to give Ava some kind of award at a dinner in Midtown, a woman at another table, older, silver hair no longer in a bob, a cream jacket, had stood up across the room when Ava walked past and had inclined her head just slightly without smiling and had sat back down. Ava had not stopped walking. Mira had not stopped watching her. Ava did not mention it to Luca. Some things you keep to yourself. Ethan finished college at 24. He proposed to Sam at 25. They had their first child, a girl they named Rose after Ava's grandmother, when Ethan was 27. His cardiologist said his heart was, at that point, behaving like the heart of a man who had never been sick. Ethan cried when she told him. Sam cried. Ava, hearing about it on the phone from her office at the foundation, put the phone down and went to stand at the window for a long time. Luca and Ava had their own child, a boy, when Ava was 30. They named him after nobody in particular. They had decided together, late at night, in bed, their hands laced, that they were not going to name him after anyone from either of their families. Every name on both sides came with a history they did not want stitched to a baby. So they gave him a name that belonged only to him, Matteo. It meant gift. It was, they both knew, a little sentimental. They did not care. They had earned a little sentiment by then. And Ava, years later, standing on a different seawall, on a different evening, with a second child on the way, and a small, tired, warm hand in hers that belonged to a boy who was almost 5 years old, would think about the girl she had been on the night of the dinner party. The quiet one, the invisible one, the one who had poured wine and kept her eyes on the floor and folded her hands behind her back. She would think about the way that girl had stood in the cold outside a newspaper stand on Fifth Avenue and watched, in a mirror, a man in a dark coat pretend to read a phone that wasn't on. She would think about the 10 seconds on the corner of 2nd and 64th. She would think about the small silver pendant she had pressed twice in the back of a cab on a Saturday afternoon. She would think, mostly, about this, that none of what came after had been promised to that girl. None of it. The girl standing on Fifth Avenue in the snow had not been owed a seawall, or a son, or a husband who cooked pasta, or a mother who had stopped being afraid. She had been owed by the world she was born into exactly nothing. And what she had built over the years that followed, the foundation, the marriage, the quiet Sundays, the brother who could climb the stairs, she had built not because anyone had handed it to her, and not because she was special, and not because some invisible hand had written a better ending into her story. She had built it because on one cold night in January she had refused to be invisible, and on another cold morning in a cab she had refused to be bought, and on a seawall on the Italian coast she had said a word that she had, for most of her life, believed did not belong in her mouth. Yes, that was the thing she would want later to tell other women. Not the ones like her. Not the tired ones, the quiet ones, the ones who had been trained to disappear. All of them. She would want to tell them that the moment in a life that decides the rest of the life is almost never a big one. It is almost never a speech. It is almost never a dramatic stand. It is, most of the time, a very small refusal, made in the cold, by a woman whose hands are shaking, who is not sure she has the right, who is not sure she has the strength, who does it anyway. And that moment, small as it is, can turn a whole life around. She had been invisible once. She was not anymore. And on the seawall, in the soft gold of a falling evening, with her son's hand in hers and a man she had chosen freely, with her eyes open. Coming up the path behind her, Ava Bennett, who had once been trained to move through marble halls without a sound, stood very still and let herself, for the first time in a long time, be seen.